We got to talk about the war, right?
Hamas is building new bases. It is not yet over.
You didn't go along with them, though. Bennett is out there in the back room putting together a coalition. You must have been under enormous pressure.
It was very difficult, very difficult. It was also unpleasant.
Sovereignty over all of Judea and Samaria. Is it too soon? I'll tell you what President Trump said to me. Hi, I'm Ambassador David Friedman. This episode, I had the chance to speak to an up-and-coming rising star in the Likud party, Amichai Chikli. There's a lot more to come. You're going to see decision makers, deep thinkers, political leaders, people with real influence who are going to talk about the future of the state of Israel. Most importantly, we're going to talk about the future of Judea and Samaria. We're at an inflection point in the history of the Jewish people. And you're going to see places in Judea and Samaria you probably have never been to. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on social media. I think you'll find that the content that we provide, you're not going to see it anywhere else. Hi, everyone. I'm David Friedman, and welcome to the One Jewish State podcast. We have a really interesting show today with one of Israel's most interesting political leaders. He's a friend of mine. He's a rising star in the Likud party. Amichai Chikli. Amichai, welcome.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. We're coming off the Antisemitism Conference that you sponsored. It was the latter part of last week. I thought it was a big success, really terrific. A lot of people, a lot of interesting people. Mm-hmm. Tell me just, how you planned that, what you hope to achieve, and, how you view its results.
So the idea was to bring a variety of forces who are relevant to fight the threat of anti-Semitism, but to try and put aside political correctness and address the main threat as we see it because of the statistics that we see in Europe, and not just in Europe, also worldwide, and is the rising threat of radical Islam. Most of the anti-Semitic incidents in Europe are coming from Muslim immigrants, so it's not politically correct to say it, but it was not Dutch people who were chasing and beating the Maccabi fans team in the streets of Amsterdam. And in the Hyper Cacher or Toulouse or all these terror attacks in Paris and in France, once again, these are not Frenchmen, these are Muslim immigrants, and many leaders worldwide won't say it. And therefore, we said we want to bring with us the forces who are addressing the challenge, saying we have a common enemy, a common threat, and let's fight it together. Now, not just radical Islam, but it was a main part of the event because it's really today, when you look at anti-Semitism worldwide, also in the US, CARE, SJP, these are all Muslim Brotherhood organizations with a nice dressing. Mm-hmm. So that's, I think, what made the conference a bit different.
Well, it made it controversial, not just different. And you brought with you some people, and I thought it was terrific. From my perspective, if people who are typically associated with non-supportive parties are willing to say, look, we're abandoning that. We may have had anti-Semitism in our past. We're going to abandon that. We're going to come to Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. We're going to stand with Israel, and we're going to fight anti-Semitism. Mm-hmm. They ought to be at the front of the line, right? Yeah. And you brought those people. You brought Jordan Bardella from France. You brought leaders of the right-wing parties from Sweden, from Poland. Of course, the Hungarian leadership was there, which is already, controlling the government and making Hungary, frankly, a very safe place now for the Jewish people.
Maybe the safest capital in Europe.
I think so. I think it is.
Budapest.
And then instead of everybody clapping their hands, a lot of the Israeli left or the Jewish left, including in America, they said, well, those people are to write for us. We're not going to come. I thought that was self-defeating. I don't know what you think.
It was disappointing, but not really surprising. I felt sorry that they didn't show up, some of them, but I said immediately, the first one to cancel and actually to boycott the conference was Bernard-Henri Lévy. It took me less than 30 seconds to say we're not changing the plan. We respect Bernard Henri Levy, but we're not going to ban our friends. We are not going to turn our back to our friends, because really I've met Marine Le Pen, and my first questions were regarding the Jewish community. Does she have any intentions changing the kosher legislation or harming whatsoever the Jewish community's habits? She said absolutely no. She walked with the community after October 7 on a parade to combat anti-Semitism. Macron banned this. He didn't show up. She was against the ICC decision regarding Netanyahu and Gallant. She was very supportive against Hamas. Now we have bad news regarding Marine Le Pen, but
Yeah, she's been disqualified if that decision holds up.
But the party, generally, the same goes for Bardella. Bardella said that it would be a terrible decision to support the Palestinian state after October 7, a reward for terrorism. And based on all these statements and the meetings, I had a meeting also with Bardella during the CPAC conference. I said, I want you to come and to attend the conference, because we see how you speak regarding radical Islam. We see you supporting the state of Israel and the Jewish community. They are saying we are the best protectors. We are the shield for the Jewish community. They say it.
Right.
And I thought it was very important to have these kind of parties. Same goes to Vox in Spain, Swedish Democrats. These are the most pro-Israel, pro-Jewish forces in Europe. I think it's hilarious to ban these parties. Now you have more complicated issues, such as the AfD in Germany, which is also super against radical Islam, and they were also in support of defunding UNRWA and serious legislation against BDS, and they have super supportive members for the state of Israel. But also on the fringes, they have some members who are seems to be anti-Semitic, such as Maximilian Krah, who said that not everyone in the SS was necessarily a criminal. And by the way, Marine Le Pen, she decided that they won't join the Patriots for Europe framework in the European Parliament because of Maximilian Krah. So we're not rushing to do business with every right wing.
I thought just the opposite. I thought that, at the conference there was an acknowledgement that anti-Semitism exists on the extremes of society, on the left, on the right. I thought there was a lot of attention given to condemning the right as well. And it's to your credit that you drew the line. It wasn't just about having a common enemy. Because, look, Israel does have a common enemy with the extreme German parties, right? They both have an enemy, but, there are limits to how much a common enemy can create a friendship.
Yeah. I think that the fight against anti-Semitism today is the fight for the future of Western civilization. And when we speak about these Judeo-Christian values, yes, there are differences between Judaism and Christianity. It's also, when you go inside Judaism, there's a huge difference between Reform Judaism or Orthodox, not to mention ultra-Orthodox Judaism. And within Christianity, there is huge differences between the Protestant or evangelical church and the Catholic church. But still, there is these basic values. First and foremost, the value of life.
Yeah.
The value of life, which radical Islam is absolutely there. They say we admire death. A death cult, Douglas Murray calls them, and he's absolutely right. Second, the value of freedom. And I think that these both pillars, the sacred of life and the value of freedom, these are like the foundation of Western civilization. And we are fighting for it in Europe, here in Israel, in America.
Yeah, and I think look, we don't need to talk about America, but we have the same issues in America. We have problems on the right. We got problems on the left. The war, obviously, with Hamas brought to the front the left-wing progressive, Hamas supporting anti-Semites. But as I said at your conference, I'm an equal opportunity condemner of anti-Semitism on the left and the right. I wanna talk to you about what I think is most interesting about your political career, because I think it's a career that began with enormous courage that I doubt people who are watching this really understand. And if I can just set this up, and I was the ambassador for 4 years, and somewhere along the way, Israel started having elections, right? Had elections after elections after elections. They were at 4 or 5, and there was still no real resolution. And you were at that time in the Yamina party, led by Naftali Bennett. In the last election, at which when Bennett became the prime minister, his party got 7 seats, 7 seats out of 120. In the history of Israel, somebody with 7 seats was never even talked to, about forming a government, let alone succeeded in becoming the leader of a coalition. But this was different, right? And there was a lot going on. There was a strong desire to remove Netanyahu among all these people. They would do it almost at any cost. But Bennett was someone who had said, I will never sit with Yair Lapid. I will never sit with Meretz. I will never sit with Mansour Abbas. He said, I'll never do any of these things. And lo and behold, Naftali Bennett is out there in the back room putting together a coalition, and he gets, I don't remember the numbers, 61, 62 seats among all these parties that had nothing in common. They had no uniting principles whatsoever other than to obtain power, right? He forms a coalition, and you're in his party. The prime minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett, you're one of the 7 members of that party. You had an opportunity at that point to rise pretty dramatically. You were relatively unknown up until that point, right? You could have risen dramatically in that party, and you did. What did you do?
So just a short background. So before Yamina, Bennett and Ayelet Shaked together, they form a movement. It's called My Israel. Later on, they established Hayamina Hadash, the new right. They didn't cross the threshold. And then they had Yamina. And Yamina, as you mentioned, we had 7 seats. And throughout the campaign, it was very, very clear that we are on the right to the Likud. So we criticized the fact that there was not enough police and enforcement of law in the Negev regarding the Bedouin illegal construction issues. And we have attacked Netanyahu for not being assertive enough regarding Hamas. That was the campaign. So we said we are to the right from Netanyahu regarding security issues, regarding the Bedouins, regarding the Galil, regarding economy. That was the campaign. That was the message. And we said we are committed to form only a right-wing coalition. Maybe this party, that party, but it will be a right-wing coalition. Now, throughout the campaign, very serious promises were made. First, never to cooperate with Lapid and to make him a prime minister. Right. Because people were worried, would you go with Lapid? Because it was tricky. And Bennett said, on the streets, podcast, radio, went on a TV show and signed everything. Then it said, second, Yamina said that it's forbidden to sit with the Arab party Ra'am, which is related to Muslim Brotherhood,
right?
Because they are the sister movement of Hamas. These are the words of Naftali Bennett.
Right.
They were pushing an effort to make sure that this party won't even be in the Knesset. And then they said, because one of Meretz's members said that, Meretz, the left, radical left, said that is supporting the idea of the Hague chasing IDF soldiers, we said, okay, we're not going to sit with Meretz as well. That was during the campaign. And then all of a sudden, you have the boycott, of the center party against Netanyahu and the Likud, the largest right-wing party in Israel with around more than 1 million voters. So you had Gideon Sa'ar boycotting Netanyahu, and Gantz boycotting Netanyahu, etc., Lieberman boycotting Netanyahu. And Naftali Bennett understands that he has the power to be the kingmaker. It is a huge temptation. To me, it was obvious that there is no way that we are going to form a left-wing party. And I said, okay, so maybe now he's playing in order to have more power in the negotiation, to have more ministries, and that's why he's also talking with this one and that. But at some point, I've realized that he is serious and he's lost his way. And I told him, you are thinking for the short term and not, you don't look to the distance. You're not a marathon runner. You're not a marathon runner. You are making a major mistake. You're going to take the leader that was elected by the vast majority of our family, of our camp, the national camp, and you are going to take away their democratic choice and form an alliance with our rivals, political rivals. It is insane. All the progressive forces are going to celebrate. It will be a major blast for conservative forces worldwide. Mm-hmm. It is far more than just Netanyahu. And also, the idea, and Bennett, by the way, also said, with less than 10 mandates, I will never ask to be prime minister. But then the temptation to power, just you can see,
yep.
That's it. It was...
The golden calf was a great temptation also. You know, there's a lot of temptations in life, and part of leadership is being able to hold back against them. You didn't go along with them, though. That's what I think is the most interesting, that you must have been under enormous pressure.
It was very difficult, very difficult. It was also unpleasant. I was doing my best for Yamina to succeed, like I did when we didn't cross the threshold. I knew him, I trusted him, I did everything I can. So
how did he choose you in the beginning to be part of his group?
We met during a major project that we've made when I was the head of a leadership academy named Tavor, training young men and women for the IDF in terms of not just physically, but also in terms of getting to know Israeli society. You know that there's the gap years in Israel. It's very famous. So Tavor is one of the leading pre-army leadership programs, and we've initiated a journey for the 70th anniversary of the State of Israel with tens of thousands of people, and he was the Minister of Education back then, and that's how we connected.
I'm just curious, so Bennett forms a government. I remember it was much to the joy of the Biden administration. They said, this is great, we got a government with Arabs, got a government with leftists.
Lapid was the real prime minister.
Yeah. And they said, this is great. This is a guy who's going to give away territory to the Palestinians. This is a guy who we can make a deal with. You know, so I remember the U.S. government was very happy. But I was curious so Bennett makes this deal.
Yeah.
And he comes back to you the first time to say, listen, we're gonna sit in the coalition. I'm going to be the prime minister. You're part of my 7 member party. Did he expect you to go along? Was that the expectation?
He was surprised, but I told him there is no way I'm doing it. We're just gonna. It's like to cheat.
So if I'm
to betray the people who voted for us.
And if I remember, so when that coalition was formed, and again in Israel you need to put together enough parties to get at least 61 seats, a majority of the 120 members in the Knesset. So that coalition is formed, and they're voting right to approve their coalition agreement. And one person out of all the parties that have formed this coalition, one person votes against it.
Yeah.
That's you, right?
Yeah, I was a lone member of Knesset with no party.
So, and for as long as the Bennett-Lapid government was there, you were like in the penalty box, right? You had just nothing to do.
Yeah.
What'd you do? Just sat around?
I volunteered for the Interior Security Committee.
Yeah.
Non-formal part of the committee because I was banned from being a formal part.
Right.
Participated in all the discussions, the tour, tried to cooperate with other parliament members to push forward legislation through the coalition. I did my best as a...
You tried to be productive.
Yeah, tried.
And then just to kind of close the circle, so then to no one's surprise, again, because as a coalition, they really had no coalescing principles, right?
Yeah.
So, the government fell relatively quickly for, an Israeli government.
It was very fragile, not steady.
Yep.
No direction.
Right. And the
Very weak.
coalition falls, elections again, and now the Likud party is the dominant party, and Netanyahu again returns to becoming the prime minister. And now you're no longer a member of the Yamina party, you're part of the Likud.
Yeah.
So you joined the large party, which is where you are now.
Yeah.
And now that's how you became the Minister of Diaspora Affairs.
Emet.
So let's just turn now to where Israel is today. One of the judicial kings of Israel. I'm not necessarily saying that in a complimentary way, but someone who's associated with Israel's judiciary for a long time, known very well in circles in the United States, especially in all the elite law schools. Aharon Barak.
Yeah.
He's no longer a judge, but he's still very influential. He gets up and he says that the way the kind of right-wing coalition is going now, it's leading the country to a milchemet achim, to a civil war.
Yeah.
I thought that was ridiculous, but
It was ridiculous.
maybe I'm missing something. What do you think about that? Are we heading to a civil war in Israel?
No. You don't have. You need two for tango.
Yeah. Right.
And I don't think that first the right-wing parties and the public who support these parties is in a set of mind of being violent against his fellow brothers. By the way, in Hebrew we say a brother's war. And Aaron Barak said citizen war. And that is, it reveals the way he thinks about the state of Israel.
Doesn't understand that.
We see the state of Israel as we are all brothers, Kol Yisrael Achim. He sees the state as a secular state that is neutral to its Jewish identity. And its project of life of Aaron Barak is to make sure that the Jewish state, the Jewish part, will mean absolutely nothing. And I think personally that he rejects Judaism. He doesn't like Judaism. He's not a proud Jew. Right. He's not a proud Zionist. And I really don't like him. And I think he's a very powerful man, and I think he brought a disaster on the state of Israel. And it's very important to mention that during the war, and no one talked about it because it was the beginning of the war, but the Supreme Court took a wild decision, because in Israel you don't have a constitution. So instead of the constitution, the Supreme Court said, okay, we have the regular laws and then fundamental laws, Chukei Yesod. So we can cancel regular laws based on the fundamental laws, okay? Yeah. That was the first step led by Aaron Barak.
Yeah.
But still, with this logic, the Knesset, okay, the people with their representative, are the source of power. But during the war, they said that the Supreme Court can also cancel these fundamental laws, meaning that the Knesset is no longer the source for legislation, meaning to cancel Israel democracy.
Right.
And this is the real project of Aaron Barak. The elite should rule the people, and this is the war for democracy, for freedom, and we are in a very tough situation. But I think that the vast majority of the public gets it, understands it, and step by step we will overcome this judicial revolution.
Because I think people fundamentally understand that the Israeli court system plays an important role, but the Israeli court system is a system of unelected people who have no accountability to the public at all. And when they rule that, they can negate basic laws. What they're basically saying is that the court system is superior to the will of the public. And the people that oppose that say that's challenging democracy, just the opposite. It's destroying democracy. When unaccountable judges are the rulers of the people, you don't have a democratic system. So look, this will work itself out. I agree with you. And I'll ask you this, but I know the answer. Look, you had a pretty illustrious military career. From what I read, you were in Egoz, which is some of my friends have kids there now. Spent some time in Shayetet 13, right, which is essentially Navy SEAL equivalent in Israel. And like everybody else who's in the army, and there's some, it's mandatory in Israel. Relationships get formed there between religious and secular, between right and left, and I think that's maybe the fundamental reason that Israel is different than a lot of other countries, because political issues now are in flames everywhere. I mean, here too, in Israel, in America, in Europe. But as you pointed out, I mean, here you've got people who are Jews and who have that unifying principle of being in the single Jewish state, and they're not willing to give it up. So at the end of the day, they'll go to a point, they'll yell, they'll scream, they'll call each other names, but nobody's prepared to give up the only Jewish state on the face of the earth.
Absolutely. And I think maybe one last comment about the Supreme Court. In one way, they possess now the enormous power that they ever had.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, at the same time, they are in the weakest point because they don't have the respect that they had in the past. Aaron Barak was not justified, but he was very well respected. Yitzhak Amit and the current Supreme Court, because of his radical decisions and because he took away the power from the public, is today in a very, very weak point.
Well, when a court is perceived as fighting for its own power, that's when it starts to lose power. In the time we have, I want to get to a couple more issues because there's so much to talk. We could talk about any one of these issues for an hour, but we got to talk about the war, right? 16 months into the war, a war on 7 fronts. I think you tell me if you agree. I would say on every one of those fronts, Israel is not only winning, but has performed magnificently, whether it's Hamas, whether it's Hezbollah, Syria, Iran, Yudav Shomron, Houthi. I mean, wherever there is firepower, Israel's responding with 10 times the firepower, and they are defeating their enemies, but nobody's been completely defeated yet. And we still have hostages that are being held. Where's the war going, and where do you think? I know you're not a prophet. Where do you think it's going?
Okay, so first of all, I think that major success was with Hezbollah. I think that due to the leadership of the head of the Mossad and the preparation that were made in the intelligence forces and the decision-making of the Prime Minister of Netanyahu, the organization went totally out of balance, the leadership of the organization. Basically what happened after the Beeper attacks and later on taking down Radwan force leaders, and then Nasrallah himself, when the troops entered Lebanon on a ground invasion, they found almost no enemy. They have lost their will to fight. And this is a total victory.
They were probably, at least on the border, certainly Israel's most competent enemy.
Yeah, and our mistake was that we were preparing heavily to the war against Hezbollah, but we undermined, all of us, we undermined the threat coming from Hamas. Yeah. And I think that this is why we were not as prepared for the war against Hamas. Hamas is in a very bad situation. but he started the war with a successful raid, and it was far more difficult to finish the job with Hamas because we were not as prepared in terms of the intelligence. I think that we need to say that the security service who is in charge of the intelligence in Gaza was not ready as the Mossad with Lebanon, and so it took too much time, and also running the operation in Gaza wasn't as successful as it was up north, but still Hamas is 25 years back in terms of his capabilities. Is in a very poor situation. Obviously, he has hostages, so we are in a far more delicate situation with Hamas. Syria is also a tremendous development. The fall of Assad regime and the collapse of the Iranian, they had Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, but the greatest threat currently that is evolving to the state of Israel is Syria of Muhammad Ashara, which is Muslim Brotherhood, just like Hamas, with a superpower in its back, led by Erdogan. And I wish that the people in Turkey will succeed in their protest and will bring down this fanatic Islamist dictator who is no friend of America and is no friend of the West. And I really hope that we will see democracy restores in Turkey, because otherwise it might take 5 years, it might take 10, but there will come the new Iran. That is for sure.
So when Trump floats the idea that America, together with Israel, maybe other investors, will take over Gaza, the people there will be moved to other places where they can get away from the buildings that are going to collapse and the bombs that haven't exploded yet, and Witkoff says it's 15 years to really, restructure it. I was a strong advocate for that idea. Mm-hmm. Because it's really the only way to really treat people the right way. They can't live there anymore. It's not livable. But second of all, and maybe more important, it's the only way to really show the defeat of the radical Islamists in Hamas. When America went to war against ISIS, mm-hmm. they calibrated their victory by destroying the caliphate, by moving ISIS or killing the ISIS terrorists and getting them out of various pockets of land. Mm-hmm. I think these terrorists, very much, want to control land, and when they lose it, well, then they know they've really lost. Is this possible? Can we do this? What do you think?
So first of all, I agree that taking land as part of a military victory is important in the Middle East, and it's important against this radical jihadist organization. Now, regarding the future of Gaza, first and foremost, we must make sure that Hamas is eliminated, and we're not there yet. Second, we need to understand that Hamas is building new bases and new headquarters. His main headquarters now is, how surprisingly, in Turkey. And they are shifting their efforts to global terrorism. So we need to understand that the war against Hamas is not yet over. It will evolve into a new phase of war, more global terrorism, and this is something that we need to understand. Regarding the people that live in Gaza, so first I think it's fair that they need to be able to move to other places. I think it's weird that Egypt for so long banned the option to immigrate, because when we see the war in Ukraine, so look at what's going on all around Ukraine, in in Poland and other places, they have millions of refugees coming from the war. And therefore, I think we need to open the border with Egypt to allow people to move to Egypt, from Egypt to other countries, Muslim countries. Not necessarily everyone, but those who want to have a better life somewhere else, we need to allow them to do it as refugees. Second, the forces who will reconstruct the parts of Gaza that are still livable, I think it needs to be the moderate forces in the Middle East, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, obviously the US, maybe European countries. They are the ones who need to be in charge, and we must make sure that Turkey and Qatar, the Muslim Brotherhood states, are not part of the efforts to reconstruct these parts where people in Gaza will still live.
What about one of my favorite places in the world, Judea and Samaria?
Yeah.
You know, you were with me here when my book, One Jewish State, Medina Yehudit Achat, was translated into Hebrew. We had a lovely event. You were there. Many of the members of the Knesset were there. You know, right now, Israel is still fighting a war. I think all those 7 fronts, more or less, still have some kinetic activity. You know, it's a country that is trying to climb out of enormous trauma. At the same time, almost everybody knows, I mean, people now on the left know, there's no such thing as a two-state solution. And that was really the thesis of my book. Well, if we can't have a two-state solution, we shouldn't have a vacuum. And then I began to kind of explore what it would like if Israel had sovereignty over all of Judea and Samaria, which I strongly endorse. What is it too soon right now to be talking about that? Is there a pathway, you know, even an imperfect pathway? Is there a political pathway? And if so, how far off are we from really moving on it?
Okay. So first, I think it's very important to say that the Palestinian Authority is first very weak in terms of the public opinion in Judea and Samaria. If you would have election, you had no election in the past 20 years, but if you have elections, you'd have Hamas in power. So the population is extremely hostile to Jews. It is, according to the latest ADL report, the most anti-Semite entity on the face of Earth. Not surprisingly, with the Mein Kampf as a bestseller in bookshops in Ramallah and other places.
Wow.
Admiring terrorists in the education system, the pay-for-slave mechanism that actually gives salary and ranks to each and every terrorist based on how many Israeli managed to kill in his terror attacks. And therefore, I think that the Palestinian Authority is irrelevant, one. Second, even if it was relevant, it's not that of a big difference from Hamas. And they have their religious leaders who were putting away fatwa, basically saying, go and kill the Jews, the ancestors of apes and monkey and pigs and whatever. And it's the same ideological family of Hamas, less religious, but it's not that different, so I think the Oslo project is a total failure, and I think that the most important thing in the Trump approach is to saying the Oslo agreements totally failed, and we need to think about new solutions. This is also the logic behind Abraham Accords, and you know it better than me, saying, no, we don't need to solve the Palestinian issue first and then go and normalize the relationship with the UAE, Morocco, or Bahrain, but the other way around.
Right.
So the first thing to understand, the Palestinian Authority is irrelevant and it is extremely hostile. We can't do business. The challenge is the population. Okay? You don't want to rule the Palestinian inhabitants in Jenin, Nablus, Shem, Hebron. It's a lot of people. So,
But the army does go in now more often than not, right? Because there's a
but
lot of
I'm
risk there.
saying I don't want to rule the life of the Palestinians in those places. So I think that the model of autonomy is the relevant model.
Right.
It might be a local autonomy based on a city, because also the Palestinians, they don't really get mixed. Those from Jericho and those from Shechem, or Shechem and Jenin, etc.
So let me take what you said and try to move it into my book, just because I want you to like my book and I want you to support it. So the idea of, let's say, Arabs living in Jenin, which is 100% Arab, right? Because the Israelis can't even go there, right? Whether it's Jenin or it's Shechem or it's Ramallah, having local autonomy so that from a political perspective, Israel's not there, at least at the beginning, but subject to an umbrella of Israeli sovereignty, security, ultimate control.
We need to have sovereignty on sea area.
Yeah.
That's what's crucial, because the current situation in which you are in control of the villages, but all around you have this illegal, crazy construction of not just the Palestinians, but also European countries with investing billions in trying to circle Jewish villages and to make sure that we will not be able to live in Jordan Valley.
There's more illegal building in sea by Arabs than by Jews.
The best case is what's happening in Judea desert.
Yes.
It was supposed to be a Palestinian nature reserve. It became a city, destroying the desert.
Yeah.
So therefore, sea area, Judea desert, the Jordan Valley, all the Gush Etzion, Susia, all this, it should be under full Israel sovereignty for good.
I'm with you, and I'm going to take it one step further, and I'll tell you what President Trump said to me 5 years ago. He said, if we do that, and we don't somehow take care of Area A and B, Area A and B will become Gaza. And he said, we have to have a solution to that too. And so what I think is, look, on the one hand, you're right. It's a very dangerous population, and the Israeli security apparatus has to be there. And frankly, if there are people there that want to kill us, we have to kill them first. Okay, so there's no question. The question is, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, is there a way where they can have, can be empowered to have better, more prosperity, more opportunity, be less dangerous, in a way, again, under the umbrella of Israel, but with more local autonomy. I mean, I think if we don't find in the long term a solution to Area A and B,
it means to give them the ability to choose in the Knesset.
No.
So it's a challenge. I think that the model of autonomy is the relevant model for now.
Okay. Let's keep talking about that, because it's an area that you and I are both very interested in. Let's just wrap it up with this. Trump's been in. It seems like he's been president for a year already, but it's only been about 75, 80 days, something like that. Where do you see the landscape changing in ways that are important for Israel?
First and foremost, combating anti-Semitism. We mentioned, and not just me, you also and many others, what's going on with the fight against anti-Semitism, the war against anti-Semitism under the leadership of Trump is absolutely outstanding. What he had with the previous administration was a catastrophe. They've undermined the IRA definition and brought a new definition aside to the IRA definition, which for us is a major blow to combat anti-Semitism, because only the IRA definition addresses the issue of demonizing, delegitimizing and taking double standards regarding
The Irish
state of
definition
Israel.
covers all the crazy
Yeah.
people all around the world that are out there
We're
protesting
saying
now.
that only the Jews have no right,
Right.
for self-determination, which is anti-Semitism. This is not criticism against the state of Israel. It's saying that the state of Israel has no right to exist.
Right.
The Jewish people has no right for their own state. And only the IRA definition covers that. And when you bringing the Naxus definition that was in the strategy paper led by Deborah Lipstadt and Biden, you are basically undermining the main force to combat anti-Semitism. And that was, I think, very bad. Second, they have brought CARE, who praised later on the October 7, the head of CARE praised the October 7 massacre. They were part of the strategy. So they were also, speaking
They were part of the committee to fight anti-Semitism, the ones that were the most anti-Semitic.
And Islamophobia.
Yeah.
And when it was outside, he gave a speech, and then someone asked former President Biden regarding the demonstration in U.S. campuses that became violent when Jews were not allowed even to go into Columbia University. And he said, yeah, I condemn those demonstrations, but I also condemn those who doesn't understand what's happening with the Palestinians. So the attempt to equalize and say, Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, it was so unserious. And what we have now with taking out Hamas supporters, Hezbollah supporters, this is so important. This is so important for America, much more than it is important for us. It is important for the future of America. Because take a look at what's happening in Britain. You have now towns that are under Sharia law. You have sections in London under Sharia law. And you have movement within America. One of them is Engage, saying we want to have America 100 years from now to be a Muslim state. So this is very serious. AMP, SJP, CARE, Engage, all these fabrics of the Muslim Brotherhood, this is super, super dangerous. Now the first victims are, like many times, are the Jewish students in the campus or Jewish communities. But these steps to take them out, Hamas supporters, Hezbollah supporters, to investigate these organizations that we just saw now, and also to defund Columbia University and other universities. And I really want to also mention the wonderful Congresswoman Stefanik for a courageous fight against anti-Semitism. So I think that this administration is doing an amazing job to take a war against anti-Semitism and not just to publish endless papers with zero actions.
Well, look, I think America is probably 10 to 20 years behind Europe, certainly in the blue states in places like New York and Chicago and LA. Without Trump, I think that line would go forward, and we would end up like Europe. I have no doubt we'd end up like Europe. It'd be very, very dangerous for 5 million Jews living in America. Amichai is you're the Minister for Diaspora Affairs. Very few countries in the world, I don't think any other country in the world has a Office of Diaspora Affairs. It's a recognition of Israel's centrality, of its significance to Jews around the world. How do you see your responsibility in that regard?
So I think the main responsibility is to try to empower Jewish identity worldwide, to preserve our culture, our values. I think the main issue is education. How can we assist the communities with regard of Jewish education? And second is the safety of the communities, to work with governments and with the communities. And so we have also a monitoring system that tracks anti-Semitism online. With what happened in Amsterdam, we had an alert regarding the event hours before it happened. That's generally what we're doing as a ministry.
Again, I'll just say you showed enormous courage and independence when you emerged from that crazy coalition led by Bennett and Lapid, and you're doing great things now, and you're young, so you got a long future ahead of you. And as someone who has children, grandchildren, who very much need a strong, safe state of Israel. I wish you good luck, and I look forward to you continuing to do great things. Please continue your work to protect and defend our beloved state of Israel. Thank you so much.
תודה רבה.
Thank you, Amichai. Great to have you. Thanks.